very lucky to have with us Professor Changji Lee, who is one I have been following his work like from my PhD to right now. Still, I follow his work, and he's one of the one of the top notch researcher in this area. So a little bit about his biography. Dr. Changji Lee received PhD degree in electrical engineering from the University of Florida in 2009. He's a professor at Texas Tech University. His research interest is microwave millimeter wave sensing for healthcare, security, and human-machine interface. Dr. Lee is a MTT-S Distinguished Microwave Lecturer. He was a recipient of the IEEE MTT-S Outstanding Young Engineer Award. So without any further introduction, I would like to request Professor Changji Lee to give his valuable speech. Professor Changji Lee.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Muhammad, for the nice introduction. And thank you once again for the kind invitation to be here. It's a great pleasure to be here. So good evening, everyone. Without further ado, I'll start sharing my screen. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, Dr. Lee, we can see your screen.
All right, perfect, perfect. Nice. So also, I'm quite lucky that Mr. Doha joined my group last fall, and he was originally from this chapter. So we also invited Doha to be here today after my talk. Hopefully, Doha can also interact with other attendees to talk about his experience doing research and also coming to Texas Tech. Okay. All right. So I'll turn into full screen mode. And normally when I start my presentation, I always start with a video taken on my daughter Chloe when she was less than 1 year old. And this year she's already 10 years old. So you can calculate approximately when this research was done. So one night, I took a device back home. A device was designed by my students. After Chloe and my wife went to sleep, I secretly mounted the device over there on her crib. So the device was pretty much looking at Chloe, and there is nothing on Chloe's body to communicate with the device. Pretty much it's completely non-contact sensing. And as you can see, the device actually wirelessly communicate with the laptop on the other side on the table. And on the table, you can see the laptop has two waveforms. The top one is a time domain waveform, and the bottom one is a FFT result without any further processing. So basically, this type of technology can remotely pick up respiration of a person. And if the signal is good enough, sometimes we can also pick up heartbeat. So this seems like a pretty interesting research, but in reality, it was invented a long time ago. Back in 1975, Professor James Lin in Chicago already discovered this mechanism. And he published a paper using bulky, expensive benchtop systems. In 2002, there was really a big change in this area because there was a group of engineers from Bell Lab, as well as a student from Stanford. They were able to integrate the entire bulky system into a single chip. And since then, the research really took off. A lot of research institutes, as well as industry, are looking into different applications related to biomedical radar. So here, once again, are the two most inspiring papers to myself. The one on the left was published by Professor James Lin on IEEE proceedings in 1975. So as you can see, using bulky instruments, he was not only able to detect human subjects, but also he tried detecting vital signs from animals. And on the right-hand side is a great paper published in 2004. The first author, Amy Joy-Coor, was a PhD student at Stanford at that time. And she was doing internship with a group of engineers at Bell Lab, Olga, Victor, and Jinshan. And Greg was Amy's PhD supervisor. So they were able to integrate the entire thing into a single CMOS chip. and inspired a lot of people, including myself, to join this research. And later on, Olga and Victor went to Hawaii, and they were actually advisors of Professor Mohammed here. And Jianshan went to Florida, and I joined Florida, worked with Jianshan in 2005. Okay, and the next page is a simple discussion explaining of how this detection mechanism works. Basically, we have a very simple continuous wave radar. The radar sends out a signal without any modulations, a very simple format, a signal in gigahertz range. And once the signal hits a human subject, it will be bounced back. So at the receiver side, if we use a local copy of the transmitted signal to down-convert the received signal, then in the baseband for quadrature mixer, we're going to have two channels, cosine and sine, and the signal will be phase modulated by the movement, because basically the movement x of t will change the distance for the signal to travel, and that in turn changes the phase of the two channels. So if we plot the I and Q channel ideal signal on a constellation graph, you will see that the trajectory will be moving along a circle. And if you can demodulate the angle for the circle, pretty much you can recover the movement x of t. But of course, behind the scene, there's a lot of non-idealities, as Professor Mohammed all have worked on. There are channel mismatch, there are like a phase amplitude mismatch, a lot of noise interference coming from clutters. So the real scenario is actually more complicated and deserve a lot of R&D efforts. Okay, and on this page, I also want to point out, if we look at the phase modulation, it's inversely proportional to lambda, which is wavelength. Therefore, as we increase the carrier frequency, reduce the wavelength, potentially we can make the phase modulation bigger, and therefore we can have a higher detection sensitivity. So throughout the years, people have been pushing forward with millimeter wave radar and nowadays even terahertz radar for this type of small motion detection. Finally, I want to mention that in the video demonstration I showed at the beginning of the presentation, the transmit signal power was more than 1,000 times lower as compared with the peak power of a cell phone. Therefore, this technology is very low power and safe for human beings. All right, and that mechanism, we give it a name of vital Doppler. Another type of Doppler effect for biomedical application called microdoppler. Basically, this refers to Doppler induced by body movement. So for example, if I have a radar in front of me and I sit down, after that, if I raise my hand, put down my hand twice, you will see a spectrogram as a function of time. So over there, you can see as we sit down, our body will move away from the radar in front of us. Therefore, we're going to generate a negative Doppler. But in the meantime, our head will lean forward. We're going to see a very weak, small, positive Doppler simultaneously. And after that, those are the signatures corresponding to the two hand movements. Okay. On the bottom side is another example of a person who walked away from radar, generated negative Doppler. And then this person pulled hand twice. You will see the signatures in the middle. And after that, the person walked back to the radar, generating a positive Doppler. Okay. So leveraging this mechanism, the industry actually has been doing a lot. For example, Google has a team called Google Sorry. They focus on using millimeter wave radar to remotely pick up hand gestures, hand movement, finger movement. And with that, they are building up remote non-contact human-machine interface so that for small devices, you don't have to touch the screen, you can remotely control it. And a few years ago, Google actually sold this Pixel 4 phone. And then in Pixel 4 phone, there is a 60 gigahertz radar chip developed by Infineon Technology. And using this chip, they were able to remotely control, like a user can remotely control the phone, play music, volume up, volume down, play forward, play backward. Okay, so this is actually quite exciting. Unfortunately, a newer version of Google Pixel phone has removed this radar sensor because they are pursuing for really low cost. On the other hand, Google actually is quite interested in radar sensing technology. So in their newest version of their Google Hub, over their Nest 2 Hub, they integrated radar again. So this is currently on the market. In the US, it's $99. In Europe, it's about 99 euro. So basically, the device can be placed on the bedside. And when a user is sleeping, the radar inside the device can continuously monitor the sleep quality, the orientation of the person, the stage of sleep, and vital signs. And of course, for this type of application, a lot of advanced data processing has to be involved. That is why Google is working on that. Recently, in 2023, they published a paper, did a lot of human subject study, and demonstrated the performance reliability of this technology. And in their work frame, of course, the front side is millimeter wave radar, and back end, they have a lot of machine learning involved in post-processing. Okay. All of this actually are driven by the aggressive positive development of the semiconductor industry. For example, even back in 2017 in Hawaii, during the International Microwave Symposium, those big companies, Texas Instruments, Infineon, Analog Devices, they all demonstrated their millimeter wave radar solutions. Texas Instruments is very well known for their 77 gigahertz IoT automotive radar. Infineon actually demonstrated their 60 gigahertz gesture recognition vital signs radar. So on site, this is a photo taken on site on the Infineon booth. Their radar is shown over there, and it's connected with a smart tablet through USB cable. And on site, their staff member can train a conference attendees. Within a couple minutes, the attendee can control the tablet using their hand gestures, play music, doing a lot of things. In the middle is a booth by Analog Devices of their 24 gigahertz vital signs detection radar. A couple years ago, Infineon actually started to deliver this small module with USB interface on the market. So nowadays, for example, in the US, you can easily buy this from Mouser. And the nice thing about this module is it can directly plug into a personal PC. And after that, even data scientists, computer scientists, they can do a lot of research using modern smart radars. And for this module, there is one single chip over there. This chip actually works at 60 gigahertz, has 3 receiving channel and 1 transmitting channel. With that, this single chip was able to do beam steering. You can control the beam to point towards the direction of interest. The chip can also have 2 versions. One is Doppler and another is FMCW, frequency modulated continuous wave, which I will talk more today later on. Okay. Besides that, there's a lot of other companies, including NXP, Silicon Radar, 2Pi Labs. They are actively working on millimeter wave radar semiconductor products. All right. And on the system level, the industry is also doing a lot. For example, there is a very well-known research-oriented big company, IMEC, in Europe. And what they have been doing is really high frequency, above 100 gigahertz radar sensors. In the meantime, they have a team of system engineers looking at different system applications. So shown on this page is the work done by Dr. Marco Mercuri. He used to be with IMEC, and his team investigated the scenario with the radar in the room and multiple people moving in the room. And they demonstrated if a person sits down being stationary, then they can also not only track the location, but also monitor the vital signs of the users. And after a few years with IMEC, Dr. Marco Mercuri also joined the academic, and he returned to Italy and became a professor there. Okay, so with that, I will move forward, like talk about distance detection, because so far we have been talking about detecting movement, like respiration, heartbeat, or gestures. Actually, another big category of radar application is to detect the absolute distance from a target to a radar. And in order to achieve that, bandwidth is really important. And one very classical solution is the so-called frequency modulated continuous wave radar, FMCW radar. So FMCW radar is not complicated at all. Basically, FMCW radar sends out a linear chirp whose frequency increases linearly as time goes by, represented by this red curve. And once this signal hits the target, it will be bounced back. So the received signal will have a delay as compared with the transmitted signal, okay, this blue line. So if we can detect a delay delta t, we can easily calculate the distance. Unfortunately, for indoor application, this delay is in nanosecond level because the signal transmits at the speed of light. So it's very hard for a low-cost portable device to directly detect the delay in time domain. Instead, FMCW radar compares the TX and the RX signal. For example, you can use a mixer to mix the two signals. After you mix the two signals, in the baseband, the mixer will down-convert and generate the bit signal. And the frequency of the bit signal, FB, pretty much tells us the information. Because we are the engineers, we control the slope of the transmitted chirp. With this FB, we can calculate the delay, and in turn, we can calculate the distance. Okay, and we have to divide by 2 because the signal has round-off trip delay. You have to send signal out, and signal will come back. Okay. And as regard to how to detect the frequency FB, there is actually a pretty fixed procedure. Basically, we send out chirps one by one, and we receive this received chirp in dashed line. And at the output of the receiving mixer in the baseband, we're gonna detect those time domain baseband bit signal, right? So once we get this bit signal, what we have to do is to first take one response of one chirp, this response out in time domain, and then we apply a FFT to convert it into frequency domain. And after that, the frequency of this peak actually is the FB we want to detect. This is called the bit frequency. And based on the bit frequency, we can calculate the distance. Okay, so because of this, for a lot of radar engineers, this frequency axis is really a range axis, simply because we have one-to-one correspondence between the bit frequency and range. So a lot of radar engineers also call this axis as range domain or range axis, and they call this spectrum as range profile. But really behind the scene, the only secret is one FFT, single FFT, to convert time domain into our range profile. Okay, and with that, we can do a sort of a textbook demonstration. So on this page, we first consider a case of a single person who walked away from radar and then came back. So the detected signal, this graph was obtained by continuously performing FFT. And the y-axis is time, x-axis is range. Okay, so as we can see, this person first moved away from radar, the range increased, and then the range decreased. In the second example, we had two people walking back and forth. So the first person walked away from radar, then came back. The second person walked towards radar, then left the radar. Okay, and in both results, you can see there are a lot of vertical stripes. And you may wonder, what are the stripes? Are they interference, noise? And the answer is actually those stripes are quite normal. If we perform experiments in a practical indoor environment, then we are going to have a lot of furniture, things around us, right? So everything is returning radio frequency signal, bouncing the signal back. But those things are not moving. Therefore, you will see vertical stripes, basically representing clutters at fixed distance. Okay, and from this point of view, we may wonder, is radar really good? We have so many clutters. And the answer is, actually, this is very easy for radar to handle, because radar not only detects range, distance, but also detect Doppler speed, right? So that being said, in this demonstration, we actually had two people walking back and forth in a very narrow corridor, and we used a home-designed radar working at 5.8 gigahertz to monitor the scene. On the left side, we are plotting the Doppler and the range in the same animation graph. So the y-axis is Doppler and x-axis is range. Okay, so as you can see, as the two people move back and forth, there is one person here and another person over there. And all the clutters essentially are moved to this horizontal line because the clutters do not have any speed. Okay, on the upper left side is a plot of the range only as a function of time. So if you look at range versus time, indeed we have a lot of clutters. But if we leverage Doppler as well, then we can easily see where the two people are. And I want to point out this experiment was done with a customer-designed 5.8 gigahertz radar with only 320 megahertz bandwidth. So for the state-of-the-art millimeter wave radar working at 60 gigahertz or 100 gigahertz, the bandwidth is much bigger, the resolution will be much higher. Therefore, you can also see the arm movement, the leg movement of the two peoples. And with that, you can do a lot of interesting things. Okay, so the first thing I want to expand a little bit more potential application is fall detection. So consider the case if we have a person who is falling towards a radar, then the distance will reduce, the speed will increase because the fall will accelerate. And eventually the signal will become very weak as this person lies down because he's out of the view of the radar. So professionally, we say that the radar cross-section, RCS, is very small, okay? So on the left side, you will see as this person falls down, the range actually decreases, the Doppler increases, eventually the signature will disappear. So the signature will move from here, start from here, move this way, and eventually fade away. On the other hand, if a person is falling away from radar, then you will see the signature moving in opposite direction because the range will increase and the speed will also increase, but in opposite direction. And finally, if a person is only making a small step forward or making a small jump, you will see the signature bouncing around, but it will not disappear. Okay, so using the same 5.8 gigahertz radar designed in lab, we performed the experiment and verified indeed this can be experimentally observed. So in those plots over there, those are several frames extracted from video, and the top 4 frames represent 4 frames coming from the activity when the person fall towards the radar. So you will see the signature initially was here and then moved in this direction. So after a few frames, the signature disappeared. And the middle row shows the case of a person who was falling away from radar. So the signature started from here and moved in this direction and eventually faded out. And on the bottom side is the case of a person making a small step. So as you can see, the signature never disappeared. So with that, we can do fall detection. Moreover, we can continuously monitor the activities in an indoor environment. So in this work, the authors actually consider the case of a person continuously performing 6 different activities. Okay, and what they did is they extracted the most energetic point from each frame, extracted the Doppler and the range information at each time. So based on that, they can build up a Doppler, range, time, 3-dimensional cube. And inside the cube, you will have a trajectory that starts moving around. Based on advanced machine learning, they were able to categorize and find out at each moment what activity was performed. Okay, so basically a combination of hardware, millimeter wave work, and signal processing, you can do a lot of things. And the next page is one of my favorite page because this work was done by a high school girl. So Rachel was from California and she stayed in my lab for 7 weeks a few years ago. And what she did is she used the radar to monitor the case for a person who is driving. So if we are driving a car, we could be doing different things. For example, we could be dancing with music. We could be looking around, right? And we can pick up a phone doing different things. But there is one dangerous behavior. If a driver feels really sleepy, then the head will drop like this. So Rachel found out different head movements definitely will induce different Doppler spectrogram. And based on that, she published a conference paper during the IEEE Radio Wireless Week. And she did a live demonstration during the conference, also participated in best paper competition and got an honorary mention prize. And so this photo shows she got the prize from the conference chair and the MTT-S Society chair of that year. So all of them were females. Pretty proud of that. Okay, and the next work was also done by a high school girl, Hannah, from Philadelphia. So Hannah stayed in my lab in 2022 also for 7 weeks, and she likes to play violin. So I told her, why don't you bring this Infinium radar back to your dorm on Texas Tech campus? And when you play violin, you can use the radar to monitor your movement. And based on that, Hannah found out different bowing movements will induce different spectrogram, different microdoppler signature. She further collaborated with researchers from School of Music, some students, and asked them to perform different movements using different ways. And she demonstrated using a radar, you can classify different bowing movements. You can also tell if a movement was performed right or wrong. So based on that, she published a journal paper on the IEEE Census Journal as a high school student, first author. So both Rachel and Hannah eventually went to MIT, and actually Rachel already graduated from MIT last year. Okay, and the next page, I'll shift gear a little bit. So far, I've been talking about using a stationary radar to monitor movement. But another type of application is you can actually mount the radar on a moving platform. For example, you can mount radar on a white cane used by blind people, and the radar can help the user to tell if there's anything in front of the radar. So before the white cane gets stuck or hit anything, the radar can already provide a warning for the user. So Professor Emanuele Cardillo in Italy has performed experiments, demonstrated the basic functionality of this idea. Okay, and of course, if we talk about this application, one big potential technical issue is that the radar itself is moving. Therefore, the detected signal is a mix of target and the self-movement of the radar. So a lot of advanced research can be further done to decouple the two types of signals and get rid of the radar self-movement. So if you are interested, there are several papers you can further look into, and definitely your potential contribution in the future could be very helpful for this type of application. Okay. And from hardware point of view, people have been pursuing a lot of things. One famous category is this so-called self-injection locked oscillator. Okay, so as I explained earlier today, a classical continuous wave radar sends out signal and receive the reflected signal and use a mixer to compare the two to detect signal of interest. But for self-injection locked oscillator, it leverages the mechanism of injection locking of an oscillator. And the history of this research was also quite interesting. Professor Jason Horn is a very well-known researcher of injection locking oscillator. So he actually spent 1 year in Florida with my advisor, Jianshan. He visited him as a visiting professor. So one day they were out for lunch. They were talking about research. So Jianshan explained to Professor Horn how continuous wave radar works for vital signs detection. Then Professor Horn immediately realized, wow, this is so similar to injection locking. Because for injection locking oscillator, basically the oscillating frequency of an oscillator can be influenced by external signal. The external signal frequency will sort of pull the frequency of the oscillator, and eventually the oscillator will follow the incoming signal. Okay, so in the case of radar sensing, the oscillator was leveraged in this way that initially the oscillator sends out a signal towards the subject, And the vital signs of the subject will modulate the signal. And once it's captured by the receiver, it's going to lock the oscillator. And during this injection locking process, the baseband will generate a sort of control signal which reflects how much modulation was added. Okay, so advantage of this is injection locking mechanism is super sensitive. And another very good thing is using injection locking mechanism, you can easily eliminate one antenna because you can use one single antenna for both transmitting and receiving. Like you can have a bidirectional path to send out signal and also lock the frequency of the oscillator. Okay, and another advantage of injection locking oscillator is you not only can work in self-injection locking mode, but also work in mutual injection locking mode. So in the last setup over there, we consider the case of having two radars, one in front and another from the back of the person. Okay, and the two injection locking oscillators not only have self-injection locking mechanism, but also the signal coming from one oscillator can influence the other oscillator. You have mutual injection locking. And based on that, imagine the case if the person have a small body movement, random body movement that we don't want. And this movement was moving towards one radar, generating a positive Doppler. Then this movement is away from the other radar, generating a negative Doppler. So as we combine the two signals, we can cancel out this random body motion and leaving the desired signal enhanced in the detection result. Okay. And most recently, Professor Hong's group considered adding imaging and range detection into the injection locking mechanism. And based on that, they were able to demonstrate, even in a very crowded environment with 3 people very close to each other, they were able to get a brief image of the 3 people, find out where the chests are located, and then focus the beam at the chest, extract the vital signs from the 3 individuals separately. Okay, and Professor Michael Wu's group from Rutgers University also works on injection locking. And in this work, they actually integrated the entire injection locking system into a single chip, wide bandgap chip working at 85 gigahertz. And with that, they were able to demonstrate vital signs detection as well. And basically, the highlight of this is a demonstrated injection locking mechanism is also fully compatible with modern semiconductor process. Okay. And one more architecture for biomedical radar research is this 6-port architecture. 6-port is actually not new. It's a very famous detecting architecture, but turns out it's very convenient for radar detection. So Professor Alex Kopin's group in Germany leveraged the 6-port architecture, and they looked at using this to detect heart sound from patients. And the paper was published in 2018. Furthermore, they used the 6-port architecture working at a really high frequency, millimeter wave range, to precisely look at one single point of the body to get a pulse. And with that, imagine if you can detect a pulse from different locations of the body, you can actually calculate what is the speed for a pulse to transmit within the body. And with that, you can get pulse wave velocity. And from there, potentially, you can also extract blood pressure and other health informations. Okay, and so at this moment, I'm gonna completely shift the gear to talk about a totally different mechanism. So far, we have been talking about detecting the natural response from a natural object, basically the signal, brutal force bounce back the signal. Okay, another category of radar detection is called nonlinear radar. And for nonlinear radar, normally the target will have a nonlinear device, and the simplest format is a single diode. And how this works is that the radar is going to send out one frequency, but the diode will leverage its inherent nonlinearity to generate harmonics of the incoming signal. So the returned signal will be at a totally different frequency. Therefore, based on nonlinear radar, you can easily differentiate between the desired tag and other things. Okay, and as a matter of fact, this nonlinear radar was very successful commercially. Back in the 1970s, a European went to skiing, and unfortunately, he was buried underneath snow after avalanche. So he was quite lucky. He was rescued by other people, and after he was dug out, he leveraged his engineering skills and developed a nonlinear rescue system, the 𝐏𝐨𝐫 system. And nowadays, 𝐏𝐶 is very popular in many skiing resorts and also national parks. Okay, and that type of mechanism I explained was based on harmonic. Basically, you send out one frequency, let's say 5.8 gigahertz, and the tag will return a harmonic, let's say 10.6 gigahertz. Okay, another category of nonlinear radar is called intermodulation radar. And in this case, we send out two frequencies within the same band, let's say 5.8 and 5.81 gigahertz. And the tag will generate third order intermodulation term. And the advantage of that is the third order intermodulation term 2F1 minus F2 and 2F2 minus F1, they are both located in the same band. Therefore, the tag can be simplified. The tag only has to work in one single band. Whereas if you look at harmonic radar, the tag has to work at twice the frequency, so you need a dual band design for the tag. Okay. On the other hand, the trade-off is for intermodulation radar, the transceiver would be more complex. So definitely there are people going with harmonic radar, also people going with intermodulation radar. Okay. So next page shows some fun demonstration. The first one was done by an exchange student, Will, from Ireland. So he came here in one summer, and what he did is he played with a piece of wire. So basically, he wraps the wire into this shape to make a dipole antenna. And in the middle, we have a circle to form a DC bias, 0-volt DC bias for the black dot in the middle. And this black dot is a diode. So he further taped this to his wrist, and leveraging that, an intermodulation radar was able to remotely pick up his very weak wrist pulse. Okay, and in the second work, Ashish actually designed a flexible array of antennas, and each antenna was driven with a diode. And with that, he embedded it into his jacket, and it was able to significantly enhance the detection of heartbeat for vital signs detection. And nowadays, people are also working on using this type of nonlinear radar to track small insects. And of course, this type of work involves integration. Sometimes like CMOS designers are working on this type of projects. Okay, and the next page is another harmonic radar application case. This was a work done by Professor Niels Post group in Germany. They are actually very well known for radar IC design. So in this case, they designed a 60 gigahertz harmonic radar on the left side. They also designed a chip of harmonic tag to convert the 60 gigahertz incoming signal to 120 gigahertz and send it back. And with this nice system, they demonstrated they can actually place the radar on a belt for a patient. And they have two tags, one here and another over there. And based on this, as the patient walk, they can monitor precisely how many degrees the angle has bent. So this is really good for rehabilitation process. And in the setup here, it's slightly more complicated because for their experiment, they used a lot of infrared tag to sort of characterize the technology. But for real application, you only need one radar on the belt and two tags, one at the knee and another over there close to the foot. Okay. And the next page is the only page I talk about ultra-wideband radar. So ultra-wideband radar also has been widely researched because the advantage over there is if you use a very wide bandwidth, different frequencies has different penetration capability through different materials. So this is actually ideal for search and rescue purpose. Okay, so there is a group, Professor Zhang's group in China. They have been working on this for more than 2 decades. So what they do is they develop real products for the government. So back in 2008, there was a major earthquake in Sichuan, China. It's a level 8 earthquake. After the earthquake, the government indeed used this instrument to find people buried underneath earthquake rubble. Okay, and so it was successfully used, but there was also sad story. So in one case, the instrument found there are signatures down below, and people spent hours digging, and eventually they found there was a chicken buried underneath. Okay, so if you track this group's recent work, you will see they actually work on how to differentiate between the signatures coming from a human and animals. They also work on how to tell the orientation of a person buried underneath, because orientation is quite important to decide the right direction to dig into the site. Okay, and over there, this is a project that Doha was involved. So there was a group of entrepreneurs. They licensed several patents that I and my advisor developed quite a few years ago. They developed this Vet Guardian device, and it's actually currently used by several vet hospitals in the United States. Basically, the device has thermal camera and also biomedical radar, and with that, the nurse does not have to open the cage. Instead, they can monitor the vital signs of animals inside directly by pointing at the animal. Okay, so you don't have to really bother the animal or touch the animal. So the device was already acquired by a public company, and a group of people are now working on human vital signs detection for other applications. Okay, of course, sleep monitoring is a very important application for biomedical radar. And it has been, this type of research, clinical study has been done in different places. And maybe in China, it's relatively easier or quicker to get permission for this type of study. So in China, actually, Professor Huang's group has already done a lot of research in collaboration with hospitals for sleep study. Okay, and the next page is a work done by Professor Changjian Gu in Shanghai. So he was actually the person who integrated Infinium radar into Google Solid, and after that, he joined academia in Shanghai. And in this work, they used the biomedical radar to monitor the heartbeat waveform for patients who just went through heart surgery. So they have demonstrated very high, very accurate performance, because they actually took this special situation. The person was put completely into sleep during surgery, and they were monitoring during the recovery process. The person was not moving, the patient was not moving at all, and they got a really highly accurate signal. The performance was comparable to those professional medical instruments. They also put a radar for neonatal application. And in this demonstration, they used the radar to monitor preterm baby. And what was found was quite important, but to me, I think this is a very straightforward advantage for radar. Basically, apnea can be detected much earlier than the drop of blood oxygen, because the reason for drop of blood oxygen was the baby stopped breathing, right? And the radar can capture the first event. Once the baby is having trouble breathing, then it can already trigger alarm. So there is a huge potential for biomedical radar to help like infants, especially preterm babies. Okay, so this is pretty much the end of the technical presentation. We have seen continuous wave radar. We have seen frequency modulated continuous wave radar for range detection. And FMCW radar has a waveform like this. But if we look at the waveform and think about the situation of communication, we are pretty much talking about analog communication, 1G communication, okay? Nowadays, advanced radar research, especially for automotive radar industry, they are looking at PMCW radar, phase modulated continuous wave And in that case, you change the phase using digital patterns, but it's very challenging from radar point of view because the speed has to be really high. However, if we compare this with communication, we are at most talking about 2G communication, okay? So what I want to convey here is there is still a long way for radar to go. This is actually a great news for young engineers and researchers because there is a lot of hope and potential, a lot of R&D. And besides the applications I talked today, radar are also widely used for imaging. You can use it for security scan diagnosis through the wall detection. We've been using radar for flood and coastal monitoring, structural health monitoring, as well as material characterization. And all of this requires contribution from talents like you from both hardware and algorithm side. And eventually it's about the state-of-the-art system integration. So definitely, I would encourage you to actively contribute to this R&D area, okay? And with that, I will use a couple more minutes to do advertisement for MTT-S. Basically, MTT-S has it's a very prestigious graduate fellowship opportunity for students to apply to. We have two categories. One is focused on medical application, and another is general category. So for the awardee, you will have $6,100 cash prize, travel support up to $1,500 to attend the IMS International Microwave Symposium. Money is not most important. The most important is this is truly prestigious recognition over the world because the program only selects the best of the best students all over the world. And the application deadline is October 15th. I strongly encourage you to apply to this program, okay? And if you are undergraduate or master students, you can also apply to the scholarship opportunity. For the scholarship, you're gonna have $2,500 cash prize, travel support up to $1,500. And scholarship is relatively easier to get because we have more opportunity over there. And the goal is to engage young researchers and students, okay? So we have two deadlines. One deadline is in April 15th, the next deadline. And after that, we will also have a deadline in October 15th, same as the fellowship, okay? And another advantage of that is if you get those scholarship fellowship, your name, photo, research title, and your professor's name will all be published on IEEE Microwave magazine, okay? So next page, I actually randomly picked several recipients over the year for the Graduate Fellowship Award. And as you can see, this is a really successful program. A lot of them already are professors all over the world. So those people highlighted in red are already educators, basically professors. And the people like highlighted in green, they are actually second generation or third generation of the fellowship award. Basically, that means their advisors were fellowship awardees, and now they got a fellowship award as well, okay? And another thing we are really proud of is you can see a lot of diversity in the recipients. And in recent years, we have more and more ladies getting this award. For example, in 2023, you have so many female recipients. And what is interesting is this year, the number of female applicants to the biomedical fellowship is already more than male applicants. So that's really excellent. All right. So with that, I truly have finished my talk. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for your time being here. Here are several photos of Texas Tech, and you are very welcome to apply to Texas Tech or visit Texas Tech. And I'm sure Doha can tell you more about the experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor, for your valuable speech and really very nice presentation. So at this point, I would like to ask from the audience, do you have any questions towards Professor Changji Li? Any question from the audience?
Hello, Dr. Lee.
Yes.
I have a slight query. You were talking about the process where you are measuring the vital signs of animals by
Yeah.
from outside the cage. So
Yes.
from my understanding that for measuring the vital signs, I need the chest displacements or of the animals from remotely, right? And so if the animals are in different orientation, like if they have their backside towards me or they're sideways, so how are you dealing with that?
Thank you very much for the question. Actually, this is a great question. This is exactly what 𝐏𝐸 is currently working on. And turns out this is not only for animals, but also for humans. For humans, if you monitor a person who is sleeping, people may turn over, like sometimes their back, their side may be facing the radar. And the good news is that a lot of times when detecting for humans, when detecting from the back, it's even easier to get a heartbeat. Because from the back side, you have less influence, less interference coming from respiration. Respiration signal is relatively weaker, so you can detect heartbeat easier. Because detecting of heartbeat is sort of negatively affected by respiration. Respiration normally is stronger than heartbeat. Its harmonics could overlap with the heartbeat frequency. And so that's actually a good news, detecting from the back. Returning to your question, for animal monitoring, my answer is I don't know. I'm sure we can get signal from the back, from side, but I don't know because of the physiology is different, the body structure is different. I don't know which side has better signal. So potentially this is something you could look into if you can recruit some maybe animal pets from friends, then you can perform experiments and find out which angle could have a better performance and which angle could have a limited performance. And on top of that, since we're already talking about animal, I would also recommend looking into the relationship between heartbeat and the respiration for animal, because I heard that it's quite different from humans. The heartbeat rate is different, the respiration rate is different. So in conclusion, the answer is that a lot of good research can be done on the animal side.
Yeah, coincidentally, yeah, I asked this question because I performed experiment on chicken actually, so using radar, and their heart is actually in the downside, not like we humans, we have like heart on the upper side. So that's where I face the problem. Like I have to place the radar under the chickens to get its heart rate. So that's how my question was relevant to your slide.
I see. Very interesting. And I wonder how do you deal with the movement of chicken? If the chicken is standing, I guess there is undesired random body motion, unless maybe if the chicken is working on eggs, maybe the chicken is not moving. So I wonder what type of experimental setup you have considered.
For preliminary experiments, we actually use broiler chickens, so they don't move that much. Not like the chickens that run continuously, and they actually like sitting a lot. So for preliminary purposes, for measuring their vital signs like heartbeat and breathing rate, so we use broiler chickens. So they actually just sit still. So that was advantageous for us. But for further experiments, I guess we need to account for movements, body movements as well.
I see. And may I ask you one more follow-up question? So what is the normal range of heartbeat rate for chickens?
We found out it was within, for if we count BPMs, it's almost like 250 to 300.
Oh, wow.
Yes, their heart rate is very fast and from our humans. We actually published a paper regarding this for the vital signs of broiler chickens recently, like last year.
Nice. If you don't mind, would you please email me the paper? I definitely want to read the paper, learn from the paper.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure, Dr. Lee, sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very clear.
Hello, Dr. Lee. It's such a pleasure to hear you. And you talked about heartbeat detection with radar, right? So are there works going on like minimizing the size of the radar? Because if a patient want to take the radar home for like real-time monitoring of heartbeats or any other, diseases, so like, is there any works going on to minimize the size so it's easy, it's portable? Like,
Right,
is that aspect you consider?
Right, that's a very good question. So a lot of devices today are already portable. On top of that, there are chips, like very small chip with all the functionality, even including the antenna integrated. There is a state-of-the-art technology called antenna in package. Basically, the antenna can be embedded into the package of the chip. So as a matter of fact, Doha and another student, Chris, are currently working on several radars like that. Like this week, they are working on a 120 gigahertz radar from Germany, and it's a single chip and has full antenna patch inside the package of the chip. So to answer your question, indeed, we can make the radar really, really small. So I don't think portability.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you for the question. Suleiman, please feel free to unmute yourself as I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, hello, Dr. Lee. Thank you for your nice presentation. The question I wanted to ask, currently microwave bands can be really cluttered, and then currently the projects I'm working on, like they concentrate on signal of opportunity. So I was curious about, like, is it really cluttered? Like we are working on GNSS signal to detect soil moisture and other stuff from the nature. The signals already available. Can that be done in case of human, where we can use already existing signal that are already in the nature that you can use for vital signals?
Thank you very much for the question. If I understand the question correctly, I think you are talking about if we can get maybe shared data of biomedical radar and work on the signal processing side. Is that right?
I wanted to ask if that like existing signal, like not an explicit radar to use for biomedical purposes. Can you use already existing signals in like Wi-Fi signal or other stuff for detecting vitals?
Okay. That's a great question. I saw Doha was smiling. So actually, next to Doha, we have a student working on that. Definitely, I believe you also have seen a lot of works like using Wi-Fi existing ambient signal for detection. To me, I think there are two categories. Like one is mainly done by computer scientists. They look at existing router and they look at the channel information you can directly get from commodity device. I think that's a very interesting approach, but personally, I think it would be difficult to really manipulate a commodity device or router and also let a router to cooperate every time. So another category is really you have to do some hardware work as well. For example, Aaron that Doha was sitting with, Aaron has been designing a receiver, a small receiver circuit, And with the receiver circuit, what you can do is you can capture a signal directly coming from any ambient Wi-Fi signal source, or even other Wi-Fi wireless signal, including like digital TV, even microwave. And then you can also capture signal bounced off from human subjects or whatever you want to monitor. And the device will analyze all the signals. So you don't need cooperation from the third party. You don't have to write a code or program or control the router to do something they don't want. Instead, you completely look at the ambient analog radio frequency signal. You don't worry about the standard. You don't worry about what is the application. You simply compare the signal, original signal, versus a bounced off signal coming from targets and detect things. So that is another approach, a more like hardware oriented approach. But of course, it requires a lot of data processing as well to understand at the end of the day what a receiver has detected. So yeah, I think this is a very promising.
It can be done. Okay. Thank you for your answer.
Sure, thank you for the question.
So if there are no other questions, then Professor Changgil, I would like to ask you a question. So you talked about intermodulation radar. You talked about FMCW radar. So my question is like for any particular sensing application, like which radar performs better? Let's say we have a FMCW radar and intermodulation radar. Then, for example, like for human activity sensing, uh, what do you think? Like which radar should perform better? Continuous wave, FMCW, or intermodulation radar, or both should work in the same way?
Right. I think, thank you for the question. So I think for intermodulation radar or nonlinear radar, at least our focus is to differentiate between intended targets and the ambient environment, other clutters. So if there is not many clutter problems, then we tend to use fundamental mode radar. And under fundamental mode radar, there is a big debate between continuous wave and FMCW radar. From on paper or theoretically, FMCW radar is the most beautiful. It has range, it has motion information. Whatever CW Doppler radar can do, FMCW radar can also do. But practically, I think FMCW, because of the functionality and also the complexity, is more complex as compared with continuous wave radar. There are also more non-idealities. Let's say the impact of linearity of the chirp, also in the 2 FFT, in order to get Doppler, you may also have error accumulated or error generated. So practically speaking, I think in a quiet single subject environment, I would recommend using Doppler continuous wave radar. But if you have multiple objects where range information distance becomes important, then certainly FMCW radar is the way to go.
Thank you very much.
Sure, welcome. So in your group, currently, are you working on continuous wave more, or are you working on FMCW more?
We are working mostly continuous wave, but recently from one funding, I bought some FMCW radar. It's a Infineon FMCW radar. So right now, like we are planning to implement those FMCW radar for some of our work. And one of my 2 undergraduate students started working on Wi-Fi sensing. So they're trying to extract channel state information from the Wi-Fi router. For our goal is to monitor different human activity using Wi-Fi signal.
Got you. Thank you.
Any other question from the audience? Abrar, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee. It was a pleasure hearing you. My question is about joint communication and sensing, because as Mahmoud sir said, I am currently working on Wi-Fi sensing with that we are trying to detect the human activity recognition and also trying to detect human postures. So my question to you is, have you done any kind of work in this sector, and what do you think, which one might produce better results? Like using radar, we might get better results in human activity detection, or we might get better results using commodity Wi-Fi?
Great question. So, because originally my group started with radar work, it's just a joke. I would say radar, but as a matter of fact, both areas have advantages and challenges. So I don't think there is a true answer to that. Like, both are under heavy R&D efforts. At the end of the day, which way could stand out? No one knows at this moment. I think actually both ways are very, very interesting. Besides that, I'm wondering, potentially we can also integrate wireless power transfer functionality into the system. So not only communication sensing, but also how to handle power, especially for sensing applications. A lot of times the power consumption is not high. So potentially we can also add the keyword wireless power transfer into our projects, our study. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Any other questions? There are no other questions. Then I thank again Professor 𝐏𝐨𝐫 for his nice presentation. It's absolutely our pleasure to have him for our online webinar. So we also look forward to having him for joining for next year for IEEE MTT-S some invited talk in our university.
Thank you so much. It's really a great pleasure to be here to meet with all the chapter members. And thank you so much, Professor Mohammed, for your invitation. I look forward to seeing you, I hope, this year again. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. So with that, I will log off. And I believe if the chapter has any other discussion, Doha definitely can share more information. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Doha, তুমি প্রেজেন্ট করতে চাও?
Hello, sir. Yeah, I can present on some information about the application procedure if you guys have the time, or if not, then yeah, we can need it here.
I think we have time, so you can go ahead, Doha, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen. You can continue.
Okay,
So
one moment, please. Doha, please. I'm sorry. So, okay, sir. Thank you very much for joining. So, Doha, please continue. Okay.
So it is a great honor to be back here and talking amongst you guys. And it has also been a great experience for my 6 or 7 months in the USA working with Dr. Qiang-Zi Lee and also the other group members. Before I start, I'd like to just talk about a conference I attended, which is the IEEE RWW conference held this January. And this is some of the pictures from that conference, and most of them are my current lab members. And as you can see that there are people from all over the country, and I've also got an opportunity to meet Mohammad Shadman Ishraq, who is also from our department and doing his PhD in the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So yeah, the conference was a great opportunity to talk to other researchers in this field and also have some great sessions and learn more from them. And with that, I'd like to start about the application process. As you guys already saw, Dr. Lee mentioned different very interesting research projects. And if you guys are interested in joining these research works in the US, there are huge opportunities here. And you can apply for PhD and also get funding while you're studying here. So one of the most important things for application is you have to identify your research interest. So the field of research at which you wanna work on. For example, I wanted to work on RF sensing and microwave from because I was studying this from my senior undergraduate year. And in the RF or sensing or microwave field, it is such a large field. So you have to specify which particular topics you're specifically passionate about so that you can get a good, interesting project of it. And in my case, biomedical applications was something I really wanted to look at. And so I wanted, because I was also working on biomedical applications using radars. So I chose biomedical radar and also security because I feel like those are very close type of work. So I could work in both of them. And then you have to find the problems that exist in those areas that you want to solve. Because if you want to make a product in the industry, those products need to be extremely robust and be able to work in any condition. So a lot of research is needed in those areas, and which in one of those research topics could be something that interests you and you could look for it. For example, I have added in a paragraph of myself from my SOP where I mentioned that what I was interested in working, and the underlined lines are the topic, the field of research, specific application, and the interest that I'm looking forward to in joining a PhD group in or a professor's group. So, and then after you have identified what type of research you want to do, and then you have to find out who are the professors or supervisors that you would want to do this research under. And that is extremely important because supervisors are the most important part in your PhD who is going to support you throughout 3, 4, 5 years. And their work has also must be very similar to the research interest you have so that you can actually work very passionately with them. And for that, you have to, one of the first things that you could do is, if you have a similar interest from your undergrad and you want to continue that, you could ask your undergrad teacher or supervisors in that area to give you some recommendations on the supervisors. This also happened in my case when I was working with Mahmoud sir. He actually mentioned me some great potential supervisors in the US with whom I could look and work with. And he also mentioned the Dr. Qiang-Zi Lee as well as one of the potential supervisors I could work with in my PhD. And you can also communicate with the alumni who are also doing similar research in the US. Yeah, and then reach out to them to ask for their recommendation if they know some people who are currently looking for students or not. And then from that, you have to list the universities where you find at least 2 or 3 supervisors that you could work with. And because you cannot apply to all the universities, so you need to select at the universities where there are multiple professors or supervisors that that work on the similar research interests that you do, so that you can easily join them. Then you can start emailing them, and you have to be very professional about the emailing, because everyone is really busy and it's not always possible to get back to you guys. So it is a good idea to email them, but you have to expect that you might not really get a reply, but if you do, that's great. So you have to always look to their website to see if there are any potential times they mentioned for emailing, or if they are actually actively looking for students that they would mention in their websites. And also, if you email them and you do not get reply, you can wait for 1 or 2 weeks and then give them another email to just remind them that you email them. And also, do not really email generic template based emails where all you just say is that you're interested and it looks like a very robotic email. Please try to make the emails very personified and work on them seriously. And then you can also mention some of their recent works and what you understood from them to show that you're really interested. And for the application materials that you'd require, one of them is the curriculum vitae or resume. There is a slight difference in the curriculum vitae or resume. Resume is very short and always small. The curriculum vitae is slightly more descriptive. However, whenever you're applying for a PhD, it's a good idea to always make sure that your curriculum vitae is really relevant to the work that you're doing. Suppose you want to list projects that you have worked on. But if your projects do not really coincide or correlate to the research that you'll be doing, there is not huge benefit in adding them. So it's better to always mention the relevant stuff with the research that you would want to do, to increase the chances and to show that you're actually have experience in these topics, so that you can also carry out a research of a in-depth research in this topic in the future. And one of the most crucial documents that you need to prepare is the statement of purpose. And this is basically the story you want to tell to the application committee, to the supervisors that you'd be working on. Since they do not have the opportunity to learn, to know about you more in depth without an interview, this is their go-to document to know about a person, what sort of work they did. And so I like to divide the statement of purpose in four sections. The first being the frame narrative or introduction, where you introduce how about yourself and how you came into this research topic. For example, in my case, I mentioned that I was looking for my undergraduate supervisors, and then I started looking at different teachers, and I found Mahmoud sir's work very interesting. From then on, I started liking this work more and more, and that's why I'd like to carry out my PhD in this similar topic. Then you have to find out mention why the program that you are applying to, or the university you are applying to, is extremely good fit for your research. Suppose you want to work in radar, and so you have to mention that the program you are applying to, that has the courses based on radar signal processing, biomedical signal processing, embedded systems, radar hardware based information, which would actually help you to learn more about this and then also do some research. Then you have to mention what qualifies you to be admitted in that university. And in this case, you can mention about your undergraduate results, the courses you took, which are very similar to your with the research you're gonna do, and if you have carried out any research papers or research article in similar topics, you must mention that. And finally, you have to close in a similar manner, where you say why you're really dedicated for your PhD and what you're going to want to do after your PhD in the long term, how you're going to benefit the society and also contribute to the research area. And you might also need some standardized test. The most important, not the most important, but something you're definitely gonna need is the language test. There are two types of language tests that you can take. One is the IELTS, the other is the TOEFL. So these are both very similar tests. And I must mention that these are only for a standard cutoff mark. If you get really good marks in them, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna be given an advantage in your application. All they want is you to know a bare minimum level of English for you to be admitted. So yeah, definitely focus on them, but make sure that you align your time perfectly. And GRE being another test, which was really impactful earlier, like 3-4 years ago, but currently a lot of the universities waive or make the GRE test optional. It is, however, good to have a GRE exam if you feel like your CGPA is not what you want to be. So if you want to increase or enhance your profile a bit, you can definitely take a GRE and try to get a very good score. Then you can mention that in your SOP and your application as well. And finally, these are some of the resources that I used in my application. For statement of purpose, I use the Write IV, and I've given you the link as well. And for CV, there's this link from the University of Carnegie Mellon, where they mention out how to write a CV. For GRE, there's a great, you can definitely use the help of 𝐏𝐸 subscription. And also there are huge Facebook groups like Nextstop and also a Reddit group that r/get admissions that provide a lot of information. And that's all from me. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Doha, for your valuable speech. I guess many students who are going to apply for the spring or the fall semester will be glad to follow your the process you mentioned, and we will also give the voice record the recording of this meeting so they can use the links that you have mentioned in your slide. So if anyone have any questions, you can ask now, like in voice or in the chat. Okay, so if there aren't any questions, we'll conclude this session now. Thank you.
I had a question.
Okay, please go ahead.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. You can go ahead.
Okay, so Doha, regarding the application process, when did you actually plan to apply? And before the session you wanted to target, about how much time did you keep in hand? I mean, when did you take the first step? That's my question.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. I see a very similar question in the chat as well from 𝐏𝐸. So I think my answer would actually help you both of you. So the application process is a daunting process, and you really need to plan a bit ahead than the session you're trying to catch. In my case, I decided to apply for PhD when I was initially starting my 4th year. So when I was initially starting my 4th year, I wanted to do a research in my undergraduate final year so that I can carry that onto my PhD as well. And so for example, there are 2 main sessions in the US which you'd like to work on. One of them being the fall session, the other being the spring session. In the fall session, most of the students actually apply to the universities, and the most amount of funding is also awarded in the fall session. And so in the fall session, professors are really busy, and it's a more of a central application process where each university have their own application committee, where you send your applications, they filter out your applications, and then they decide whether to take you or admit you or not. On the other hand, the spring session is slightly less hectic. However, spring session has a lower amount of funding, and at that time you'd have to really focus on emailing the professors. And for example, for the timeline, the fall session usually start on August, and the application deadline for the fall session is the April 15. So to really start to catch the April 15 deadline, the April 15, no, it's the December 15. April 15 is the decision deadline from at which time the universities let you know if you are admitted or not. So that as the application deadline is December 15, you want at least 6 to 7 months early. So start preparing your listing for universities, emailing professors, giving your GRE IS exam, and you might also have exams from your university as well if you're continuous students in your undergraduate or graduate programs. On the other hand, the spring session, the deadline varies from June, July to September, June, July to August. So if you target the fall sessions and, for example, you do not manage to get into the fall session, you can immediately shift your attention to the spring session because it's just a few months after. And the process is very similar, but in that case, in the spring sessions, you really need to email a lot of professors because spring session is extremely uh, the spring session is extremely focused on the professors' recommendations. On the other hand, in the fall session, most of the universities do take applicants based on their admission committee.
I had two follow-up questions. One was actually, how did you actually cope with the waiting period? Like, you've applied, and probably most of the universities won't really reply at once. So how did you cope with the waiting period when you had no clue what's going to happen? And the second question was, how much importance does the field that you're working on have on your PhD, rather than how much helpful the people around you are?
That's a great question. So I'll start with the second one. So the field is definitely important because you want to be passionate about what you're working on, right? But one of the things that I learned after coming here was definitely the supervisor is extremely important. But the other one thing that I did not keep in my mind, which was extremely important, is your lab members. I am actually extremely blessed to have the lab members that I have who are very supporting of me, who always help me in any case and always give me suggestions if I am stuck in a problem. So that's actually extremely important, is the environment that you're working on. PhD is extremely long process, and whenever you're coming to a PhD, it is not expected from the US supervisors or professors that you're very good at the topic you're going to be doing a PhD on, right? So they expect you to have a very general or base knowledge. So even if you do not get the perfect alignment of the research that you may want to do, it is not that difficult to do a research on a slightly correlated but a slightly larger topic or slightly separated topic. However, if the people around you are helpful, you can really have a great time in that topic as well. And eventually you can also get a PhD in that, really good PhD in that topic. So the people here is definitely important, because and lab environment is one of the most important things that let you continue keep going. Because if you're only working on in one place, it is extremely hard. And for the waiting period, it is a definitely tough time. In my case, I was really lucky because my waiting period was not that high, because I got my initial offer very early during the admission process. But it is something you have to really be hopeful on, and you can also email professors even after applying, and then basically be hoping that you get one of the admission offers.
Okay, so are there any more questions from the audience? Okay, so it seems like there isn't any more questions. So thank you, Duha, for coming to our event organized by IEEE MTT-S Student-Run Chapter, University of Dhaka. And I hope that your talk will benefit the people who are going to apply in the future. Thank you for coming,
everyone.
And we'll
Thank you,
conclude
Mahmoud,
the
sir.
session here. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.